Hi, my name is Emily Gray.
I'm Sofia Muñoz.
And my name is Jacklyn Perez, and we are perfectly puzzled from Texas State University.
Today, we will be sharing our considerations and support for this year's case study, addressing the complex situations in responding to suicidal ideation, intimate partner violence, and how to balance care and accountability with students.
Our agenda today will talk about the issue identification, our secondary issues, give a little bit of the historical context and definitions, lay our theoretical frameworks, talk about the ethical and legal dilemmas, our proposed solution, some consequences in campus relationships, the ACPA and NASPA competencies that go along with our presentation, some additional considerations, and our concluding thoughts.
To start us off, this diagram shows our thought process, the frameworks, and our recommendations to support this year's case study. Based on Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory, we analyzed the individual and campus interactions on the micro, meso, exo, and macro system levels. Throughout our presentation, we will explain each piece of this puzzle.
Issue identifications. So before we jump into identifying the primary and secondary issues, we wanted to touch base on some important institutional and student context pieces. Metro City Community College is a diverse urban two-year public institution enrolling 15,000 students where most attend part-time, commute to campus, and balance multiple responsibilities. The student body is racially diverse, largely adult or returning learners, and many may be navigating financial, family, or employment stressors. This context matters because community colleges often have limited mental health resources, fewer staff to student relationships, and less frequent touch points to identify early warning signs. Any response we propose must therefore be scalable, culturally responsive, and mindful of MCC's resource limitations. This brings us to the central issue in this case, which is the need to balance campus safety, Title IX responsibilities, legal and ethical obligations, and student mental health support in response to an attempted suicide that also contains elements of intentional harm towards another student. MCC must determine whether this is solely a health and wellness situation, an instance of relationship violence under the Code of Conduct, or a combination of the two. The institution must uphold policy while ensuring that its actions do not further traumatize or criminalize a student in crisis. We must ask the questions: how do we provide care and uphold accountability to our primary student of concern? And how are we ensuring we address the safety and well-being of another student in an equitable and restorative manner? There are several issues complicating the response. First is that Gabe and Sarah's relationship show characteristics of unhealthy partner dynamics, including emotional manipulation and grand gestures following conflict. Then there is the challenge that as a commuter campus with limited mental health infrastructure, MCC may not have strong care options, especially surrounding access to dating violence prevention resources. Then there are the big challenges with FERPA, Title IX, and duty of care obligations intersecting, particularly around whether Sarah must be informed of the suicide note for her safety. Next is that attempted suicide is technically illegal in the state, yet the officer chose not to press charges, which creates tension between state law and institutional response. Lastly is that the community perception must also be managed. Students may feel unsafe, unsupported, or fearful if communication is unclear, which can cause a long-term impact and future consequences. We must then think about the consideration: how does our response influence student perception and engagement to campus care and support?
Next, we'll be going over some historical context and definitions that are relevant to our case. The first being is highlighting the Clery Act, which was made in 1990. The Clery Act came to be after the tragic loss and murder of Jeanne Clery in 1986. There are various parts of her story where this could have been prevented, but the major issue was that institutions did not have any policies or procedures for proper reporting and safety measures for students. After Jeanne's passing, her parents, advocacy from her parents, the local community, and Congress were able to pass the Clery Act, which mandated that all institutions were responsible for reporting, timely response, and communication of campus policies and procedures to protect individuals in the community from various realms of harm and violence. Another important piece of legislation that ties onto the topic of intimate partner violence would be related to the Violence Against Women Act when it was reauthorized in 2013. In 2013, an amendment was made that institutions take dating violence, domestic violence, stalking more seriously and more awareness, as there was a lack of clear guidelines and just overall lack of direction of recognizing that form spectrum of violence. With our relationship too, we believe it's important to define domestic violence and intimate partner violence. For our case study here on throughout, we will be referring to Gabe and Sarah's situation as intimate partner violence, which is abuse or aggression that occurs in a romantic relationship. It can take place to both current or former spouses and former or current dating partners. A common misconception for students or anybody and any individuals is that violence is only physical. But the Center for Control and Disease recognizes and defines intimate partner violence as physical violence, sexual violence, stalking, and psychological aggression. Psychological aggression is often overlooked because, again, a lot of us perceive it as just being physical, but it's important to highlight that it is a spectrum and can transpire in many ways.
There are many things to consider ethically and legally when responding to this case. So, ethically, the safety and well-being of Gabe and Sarah are of utmost importance. We were informed that there have been signs and patterns of an unhealthy relationship, and Gabe's suicide attempt, specifically calling out Sarah for punishment, is a sign of psychological manipulation, with this being defined under interpersonal violence. We must treat both Gabe and Sarah ethically by minimizing harm done to each party in our response, while also protecting their privacy. With Gabe, we must walk the fine line between accountability for his harm to Sarah, the legality of suicide, and care for his mental health. We then want to consider accountability and care by navigating the appropriate responses for a student who is in crisis, while also ensuring a timeliness of reporting, specifically communicating with Gabe, Sarah, and the campus community in a timely manner. Legally, we want to look at institutional responsibility and state law. While suicide is illegal in this state, state laws often behave differently on college campuses. For example, when a student is caught underage drinking, their punishment is often handled by the university, not by the state. In this situation, Sergeant Gonzalez filed a report of Gabe's attempt on his life, but did not charge him criminally. As of this moment, no other disciplinary action has taken place, but MCC has the duty to care. And then we have FERPA. So the behavioral response team must decide if and how to approach Sarah about Gabe and the risk to her safety. While her being named and threatened in her suicide note under FERPA, there is a threat to health or safety of her that forms the basis for this disclosure. Then there's Title IX. So due to the interpersonal violence that has taken place, a Title IX report must be filed. This will give Sarah the opportunity to proceed with autonomy while giving her access to support and resources to process what has occurred. Additionally, Sarah will have the opportunity to attain a restraining order or a no-contact order if she chooses.
Next, we'll be going over our theoretical frameworks that we use to not only analyze this case study, but also to address and give our response to it. Like Sofia mentioned earlier, the first one that we used was Bronfenbrenner's ecological theory. This approach was used as we focus on the impacts and influences on Gabe, Sarah, Metro City Community College, the state law, and societal perceptions of intimate partner violence and mental health. The second framework that we utilized was the power conscience framework, which recognizes and addresses the intersection of power between organizations, individuals, social identities, and historical context. The third learning theory that we used was social learning by Ben Durham. This is critical in reinforcing and modeling accountability and learning opportunities facilitated by the institution. I don't want to talk about that one much yet, but it really frames our response into how we will be addressing both Gabe and Sarah within the case study.
Our fourth theory is the restorative justice model, and when responding to Gabe's breach of the student code of conduct by perpetuating interpersonal violence, the fact that suicidal is illegal in the state, we wanted to ensure that we're not unjustly punishing Gabe and are cognizant of the mental health factors at play for him. Gabe deserves to heal and be treated humanely while we restore safety and peace for Sarah and the campus community. With the restorative justice model, framing our response, we are encouraged to consider the systems that have influenced Gabe's decision, including the accessibility of mental health resources on campus and the social stigma of mental health and interpersonal violence. In our final theory, trauma-informed care, there are 6 tenets: collaboration, safety, choice, empowerment, trust, and re-traumatization. Both Gabe and Sarah have experienced trauma in this case study. Ensuring that we used the trauma-informed care lens while supporting them is necessary to minimize harm. We will do this through collaboration between campus offices like the Dean of Students, Title IX, and the counseling services. Additionally, we are giving Sarah as much autonomy and choice as we can in her decisions. Choice is more limited for Gabe as we navigate accountability to the law, campus community, and Sarah. Maintaining institutional trust will also be important for Sarah and Gabe and their willingness to access university resources. The trust between the general student population and the institution is also important, as our response will send intended and unintended messages. In deciding whether to tell Sarah she was named in Gabe's suicide letter, it is necessary to consider the re-traumatization she may experience. However, if we do not tell her, it puts her safety at risk as well. In our proposed solution, and how we will respond and what messages we will send, we will employ a multidisciplinary team to communicate messages to the campus community, to Gabe, and to Sarah. Immediately within 48 hours, we will send out a clear notification to the campus community, letting students know an incident has occurred on campus and reminding them of mental health resources and interpersonal violence resources available to them. This will serve as a reminder to students that the university staff, faculty, and personnel care about their well-being and safety. Dr. Larry Graham with Student Care and Outreach will reach out to both Gabe and Sarah to open the lines of communication, giving them mental health resources and requesting separate meetings to check in with each student. Short term, within that first week, Dr. Regina Wallace with the Dean of Students will reach out to Gabe to start the restorative justice process and discuss accountability. Emily Callahan with the Title IX office will reach out to Sarah to start a Title IX report for interpersonal violence, ensuring that Sarah has the support and resources necessary to process her relationship with Gabe and the harm done. Emily will also communicate that Gabe mentioned her in his suicide note and inform her that she has access to a non-contact order or restraining order if she would like, really emphasizing Sarah's autonomy. Over the next 6 months, to help prepare for similar future situations, we will do a campus policy review to ensure compliance with state law and care for students. Continuing education on intimate partner violence for students, faculty, and staff will take place in the form of workshops and facilitated conversations. And finally, we will increase visibility of the counseling center and local mental health resources to continue the support of our students.
Next, we're going to touch on the consequences and our campus relationships. So, based on our web diagram on the left side, we will explain the different consequences in campus relationships as they relate to the case study. So, in navigating this situation, managing campus relationships is critical because every stakeholder holds different interests, responsibilities, and expectations. First, we must attend to the relationship between Gabe and MCC. As an institution, we have a duty of care to support a student experiencing a severe mental health crisis while also upholding our policies and community safety and student conduct. Our communication with Gabe must therefore remain compassionate, trauma-informed, and focused on support and not punishment, while still clearly outlining expectations for safety planning and ongoing care. Simultaneously, we must manage the relationship between Sarah and MCC. So Sarah deserves transparency, safety, and empowerment. Because she was directly named in the suicide note, informing her of that fact is both a safety necessity and an ethical obligation under Title IX in campus policy. Supporting her means offering no contact measures, outlining her reporting options, and giving her the assurance that she has continuous access to advocacy resources. This relationship requires consistency and reassurance that MCC takes her safety seriously. We must also maintain alignment and strong collaboration within the institution, especially among the Dean of Students, Student Care and Outreach, Title IX, and Campus Police. Their roles overlap, but their priorities differ. So Title IX needs to look at the behavior through the lens of potential relationship violence. Student Care prioritizes mental health intervention. The Dean of Students balances institutional policy, community safety, and legal considerations. And by keeping these relationships coordinated, it prevents contradictory messages and ensures a unified institutional response. Next, we will look at MCC and staff and faculty. So this involves supporting staff and faculty through intentional education and training. Given the complexities of interpersonal violence, dating violence, and domestic violence, especially on a campus with a diverse, largely commuter and part-time student population, we recommend a comprehensive review of existing training and offerings. Our goal is to ensure that faculty and staff can recognize warning signs, understand appropriate reporting pathways, and respond to disclosures using trauma-informed and culturally responsive practices. This includes collaborating with Title IX, Student Care and Outreach, and relevant academic departments to develop workshops that reflect the unique needs of MCC students. By strengthening these educational efforts, it not only ensures compliance, but it also builds a campus community that is equipped, confident, and prepared to support the MCC students navigating difficult and potentially dangerous situations. Next, we must maintain MCC and the student body. So in considering this relationship with the general body, we want to address this, how it influences campus climate, perception of safety, and students' willingness to seek help in crisis. If our response appears to punish a suicidal student, we risk discouraging others from asking for support. If our response appears to ignore a threat to another student, we risk breaking trust. So by this, transparent, supportive, and minimal invasive communication is necessary so that we can reassure the campus community that MCC truly prioritizes both the care and accountability. Lastly, we want to look at external considerations like MCC in the state. So the institution must also manage its relationship with state law and the broader community. Since attempted suicide is illegal in the state, MCC must be mindful of how its response interacts with law enforcement decisions, particularly because Sergeant Gonzalez chose not to charge Gabe. Additionally, community expectations around student safety, especially in a community campus with limited touch points, shapes how the message is received by students, faculty, and the public. Our communication must be clear enough to maintain trust without violating privacy protections. Ultimately, by looking at all of these relationships, the effective management and the interconnected relationships allows MCC to respond holistically. And what that means is that we are protecting students, upholding policies, and preserving our community trust.
In addition to considering additional considerations, we'd like to include some ACPA and NASPA competencies. As administrators, educators, and practitioners, this case study represented the several commitments we have to students, whether it be caring for their well-being, upholding legal procedures and policies, and just being true to having a socially just and equitable approach to supporting each student involved in this case. All the competencies address different things. These were the top 6 areas that we thought were most relevant within our case study. We're only going to highlight a few because of the time, but the first and foremost would be one from law, policy, and governance, which we recognize that it's important to study law trends and their impact from a historical context. Policies all have a story. They're there for a reason, and we may never know when you may need to address a student in crisis like Gabe and his situation with Sarah. So it's important to have a good understanding and take the time to educate ourselves on that. Another one would be also values, philosophy, and history. We have learned through this case study that values, though there is a historical value in longstanding ones, in present day, they may not always resonate or intuitively go with with what you're solving. So it's important to consider other people's perspectives, like Jackie was mentioning, towards like working with different teams and their perspectives on it, and just finding the best way that best supports the student situation. The last one that I'll highlight would be probably from student learning and development. We used a lot of theory to practice to inform our restorative justice model and to ensure that both Gabe and Sarah were getting the proper support and development that they both need for their individual unique situations with this case.
Just like the beginning of our presentation, when addressing complex situations like Gabe and Sarah's, it is okay to feel a bit puzzled on what best practices and steps should be taken. We hope that through our analysis, we've been able to show that sometimes values and ethics will collide. And while we cannot change what happened, we have control of how we respond. For Gabe, we believe that care and accountability can coexist because we believe in the dignity and worth of him as an individual. For Sarah, we balance her autonomy while caring for her well-being and safety. Effective response and impacts takes a campus, not an individual, and this is why multidisciplinary response is necessary. We must mobilize multiple facets of our campus to ensure accountability and care for Gabe, Sarah, and the greater campus community. It is also important that we take necessary measures to ensure we are cultivating campuses that support survivors of interpersonal violence. Through working with those impacted, assessing risks, personal education on the topic, and changing policies, we can support students and create institutional change. Interpersonal violence and mental health are social and public health issues that will continue to exist on college campuses. As institutions, we must provide care and justice to our students who are impacted by these issues.
And that concludes our case study presentation. We just wanted to give a couple thank yous before we wrap up. The first to Dr. Young for being the main facilitator of the case study competition for this year. We've appreciated him answering our questions and just helping us out throughout the process. We'd like to thank NASPA for giving graduate students this platform to challenge our knowledge and skills in addressing this complex situation. It's been very fun to consider how to go about it. And then last and not least, we'd like to thank one of our program professors and also our case study advisor, Dr. Shannon Dean Scott. She was very helpful in giving us an ear and affirming that we were going the right direction with how we would respond to it. So we'd like to end on that now. And also here are our references. Thank you.